Evening, Alistair. Evening, everyone. You all right?
Very well, thanks, Ash. Yes, you've had a busy day today.
I've
With
had a good day today.
yes, I think we've all had a good day today. Um, what with the inquiry and Sturgeon's appearance before it. I don't know how much you've seen of the inquiry, but what were your immediate thoughts so far of what's going on?
I actually, I didn't think she'd burst into tears the way she did. But what was it? What was his name? Jamie Dawson. Is that right?
Jamie Dawson, yes,
Yeah, did an
he's
absolutely outstanding job. And no politician really wants to cry in public. That's not what you do because it makes you look weak. It makes you look pretty pathetic in the eyes of the public as well. So I don't think it was planned, to be honest with you. Although I think it was a desperate ruse. She had absolutely nowhere to go. Everything she'd ever said, everything she'd ever lied about was laid bare in front of the entire nation, and everyone knew that at this part of the inquiry, nobody cared what Humza Yusuf said or Kate Forbes said. Really, what they cared about was what Sturgeon was going to say, and she backed herself into such a corner that even she, who, let's face it, was a pretty shrewd operator in the past, she was lost for words completely. She had nowhere to go apart from burst into tears, realizing not what she'd done to Scotland, to the Scottish people, to education or the NHS or anything like that, but what she'd done to herself. I put in a video today saying that I truly believe now, and I absolutely believe this, we're seeing the last, finally, of Nicola Sturgeon. Her only income now is her job as an MSP. And I think she'll have some brass neck if she wants to stand for re-election again. Because who'd want her after this? She's not just lied to... I mean, we'd expect it. We see right through it. But her own supporters, sure to God, unless they've bought their brain cells on some sort of eBay auction, must see now what this woman really is, just a con artist who's done nothing for them over the years apart from use their money, which they donated for. All right, they believed in something, they donated money. She's bought Jaguars, camper vans, allegedly, and she's had a very merry time of it at their expense, and now she's got nothing left.
indeed that was your video, which people can watch on your youtube.com/, that Preston Journalist site, is certainly a tour de force in a couple of minutes. You really do slate her. You what was it you called her? Cranky's crocodile tears, which I had a laugh about. But I think the word that's been suggested to me that describes her performance is disingenuous, which is probably a good word. Um, Basically, she knew that when she was doing all these messages, she knew that there would likely be an inquiry sometime in the future, in a year or two's hence. She knew that, so that's no doubt. Afterwards, she thought, "Oh crikey, I shouldn't have written that or shouldn't have said that. I don't want people to see that," and so on. So that would be one of the reasons that she deleted them, and maybe she thinks that these sorts of messages shouldn't have been made public anyway, but she would surely know that in this day and age of freedom of information and all that sort of thing, that anything a politician says is going to come out eventually, especially when it's discussions among her so-called cabinet. That's going to come out. So the deletion thing, and the fact that she for so long tried to avoid the question of whether she deliberately deleted them or not, is really quite remarkable. I got today. However, she finally admitted it, and we've got the Sturgeon transcript that we'll put up where she actually admits it. But it took a long time for her to do it. Here it is. Dawson asked, "What's that messages between yourself and Mr. Yusuf were produced by you with blah blah blah. Where did you get them? Blah blah." Moving down, let's get rid of that YouTube Preston Journalist thing, because that's where I want to. There we go. So the last paragraph, Sturgeon says, I was very thorough, not just in the pandemic, but in all my work in government to ensure that things were appropriately recorded. But in line with the advice I'd always been given since my first day in government, probably was not to retain conversations like that on a phone that could be lost or stolen and therefore not secure. She's good at that, in talking a lot and trying to justify herself without actually asking a question. But here she got pressed on it by Dawson, who said, but did you delete them? And Sturgeon says, yes. So that's finally we get the information that she had deleted them. And about time too. Do you think she's going to suffer any consequences of having deleted them in this way?
Well, given that the establishment in this country are held to a different standard to what you or I or anybody watching this is held to, probably not. But she certainly should. She's tried saying that she didn't get the Do Not Destroy order from Westminster, which is given out to all devolved administrations and Westminster themselves, obviously, because everyone knew there'd be an inquiry, as you said, sooner or later. And she said she never got that message. Well, it doesn't matter, does it? Because whatever she's doing on government time, being paid by you and I and everybody else, the fact is, nothing is private. You're working on our time, being paid by our pound. Every message you send, every phone call you make has to be available, possibly to go public. She knew, she's not stupid. She's many things, but she isn't stupid. She knew that these messages had to be kept. That's why she's tried lying. She's tried saying at first she didn't have a government phone. It turns out she didn't. She was using her own personal phone, which, if you remember Hillary Clinton, when she went up against Trump, that cost her an election. You're not really allowed to do that. She should face consequences for that alone, because those messages can contain sensitive information in them, of course. She then tried saying she never had WhatsApp. That never works because people like Kate Forbes were all too willing to put forward messages and conversations with Sturgeon on WhatsApp. And if you watched Kate Forbes, by the way, giving her evidence at the inquiry, she was struggling to hold back her smiles as she threw everybody under the bus one by one, who she could possibly want to get rid of, who stands in her way of becoming the next leader. She couldn't wait to give the evidence. It was almost like she was having a conversation with Jamie Dawson, and they were just bitching about everybody that had been in the devolved administration before. It was actually, I don't know, I've got no time for Kate Forbes, but it was actually quite funny to watch.
Yes.
But no, I don't think she will face any consequences, just like I don't think Boris Johnson will. I don't think Keir Starmer will. We know Starmer broke the rules, but he got off with it for whatever reason. And no, I don't think any of them will. But they should do, because obviously this country is now in economically... Well, I can't think of a bad enough word to describe it. The state our economy's in. And it's all down to these people and their rule-making. I don't want to get the channel in trouble. You're not getting at the rules they created at the time that have left us in the economic situation that we're in now.
Yes. And all of these decisions that she made were, although she'll say they were about public health, she was also angling for the political position as well. How does this make us look, well, different, really? Not even necessarily better, but different. So it wasn't just a matter of public health, it was also, she was using it as a political tool. Now, I noticed that she totally denied that when she was asked something to that end by the KC Jamie Dawson. She said it was really just about public health, but that didn't really wash with me at all. She saw it as a way of making the distinction between Scotland and England. And in fact, there was a good article in today's Daily Mail by Eddie Barnes, who spoke about the psychological term called the narcissism of small differences, which apparently is some kind of Freudian theory. But it's where you need to emphasize the tiny differences. When things are so alike, in order to distinguish yourself, you have to emphasize the tiny differences. And as he put it, I'll just quote it here from his article in today's Mail. It is this need to emphasise the tiny, indeed often imaginary differences that exist between Scotland and England that has defined the Sturgeon-style period in power and continued by Humza Yousaf. It's a belief system that must be pursued even when there is no sense to it. The truth is Scotland and England aren't very different. It's a reality the SNP can't bear. And by obsessing over the minor differences between us, the upshot is that they've distracted Scotland from tackling the big challenges we face.
Well, they've created a lot of them, haven't they, themselves?
Yes, exactly.
I mean, up until last week, I put a video out. I genuinely believed they were softening people up in Scotland for the return of Sturgeon, like Cranky the Second, if you will. She was going to come back. Humza Yousaf as a continuity candidate who, let's face it, hasn't steered away from her agenda one little bit, even attempting to fight the government again on this disastrous gender recognition reform bill, which he's now given up on, thankfully. But I believed he was simply put there to keep the seat warm until she thought it was right, or the party thought it was right, to put her back in place again, and she'd come back on her white horse and start chanting independence again. Next 5 years, all that rubbish, blah, blah, blah. And I genuinely thought that's what they were going to do. But now I think they're going to be lost, because there's no way, after this evidence that she's given, which has made her look beyond corrupt. She's been, we've always called her a liar and stuff. We knew she was a liar. But now she's proven to be a liar. She's had to admit to lying in a public inquiry. There's no way back for her in the public eye. Honestly, I'll be surprised if she stands again as an MSP. I mean, she might do, because she's got a big enough ego for it. But I'd be very surprised if she's got any income left after this. Who's going to want her? The UN can't take her now because they're in enough trouble themselves. WEF won't take her, and that's the sort of rubbish that she was hoping for off the politics.
That's a good point. She's got a book deal that she's getting paid fairly handsomely with, but I'm not sure how many years that will keep her in high heels and and books. Apparently she says she loves to read, that's a big hobby apparently, and when she was First Minister, she used to be posting every night, not every night, but on Twitter, like pile of books that she's just read, and the books would never have they weren't creased, they're like the spines were not creased in any way. So somehow she was able to read these books without like opening them or creasing them. She must have just been able to absorb the information through osmosis or something like that. But Derek says that she should quit politics and face jail.
She should, but she won't.
No.
She probably will stand for re-election again, because her ego is just incredible, isn't it? She will stand again, I imagine.
I would tend to think that she probably will, unless she's got another offer that pays better. She'd certainly. There's a lot of people who support her. I mean, Nicola's army. There's a lot of people who still support her, come what may. And the sorts of things that we've heard today, they don't care about. So they'll continue to support her. But whether she would have the brass neck to do that, and she might just be sick of politics as well after all of this. I wouldn't necessarily blame her if she decided to go away and just live a quiet life.
Well, look, I know there are, of course, there's still people that support her. I know there are quite a few. But, when she arrived today, and by the way, when she arrived, I mean, is there anything legal about this woman whatsoever? I mean, not only is she, in my opinion, completely and utterly bent, but she arrived in a car without an MOT. There is nothing legal about this woman. She is just one big bag of corruption. Everything she does is corrupt. I can't think of anything she's ever done, honestly. But anyway, outside the inquiry, she was heckled and booed as she walked in. When she walked out, she was heckled and booed. There was no one there waving the Scottish flag around and cheering her as she walked out.
Yes.
Not a single person. She was heckled and booed the entire time. It just shows how far her star has fallen, in my opinion, anyway.
Oh, well, I think your opinion is mirrored by an awful lot of people as well. How far she's fallen since back when she was the star of the show, which was, I mean, that whole period between 2020 and 2021. It really made her a household name. In fact, it probably made her too famous because, you know, she insisted on addressing the nation as if she was like Winston Churchill or something like that every day from her high horse or her high platform, telling us how she's, you know, come up with the latest concoction to save us all that particular day. And it just became tiring. And
well,
then,
you know, maybe, sorry to interrupt you, maybe if she hadn't been so big-headed and so full of herself, and every time she got out of a Cobra briefing, over it was with the UK government, if she hadn't been the first to try and rush to a camera all the time and make sure that everything was about her, then she wouldn't have been hoisted upon her own petard like she is now. Maybe she could have said, well, I was advised to do this, advised to do that, etc., but she can't, because she insisted on putting herself front and centre every time, every time something happened, every time a policy was to be announced or some advice came out from Westminster or anywhere else. She had to be the first to announce it. And she had to stand. Don't forget, she was doing these silly daily briefings for much longer than anybody else. She carried on for so long. And that's, as I just said, she's been hoisted upon her own petard because she wanted all this fame and attention. It's me, 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 me. Well, now it is all her. And it's a complete and utter mess, isn't it?
That's actually a very good point. A cleverer politician would have not sought the limelight so enthusiastically, especially not on such a controversial matter, and would have played the kind of been above it all and would make occasional appearances.
Yeah, a statement role, yeah. Statesman's role, sorry.
Exactly. But no, she had to be front and centre, in your face, every single waking moment.
Who was Health Secretary in Scotland at the time? Was it useless?
That's a good question. I'm not sure. But what was that Jason Leach guy? What was his job?
Well, he's a dentist, isn't he? God knows why he was even there in the first place. I think he was there because he's pals with Sturgeon, as far as I know. He's always been quite friendly with the SNP.
Yeah. He made some kind of comment. I'll just bring it up here. Niall just retweeted something by the journalist Chris Musson, who says, staggering, the face of the Scottish so-called government pandemic response, Professor Jason Leach having a laugh with officials about wiping his WhatsApp and clearing group chats. And there, that's obviously a WhatsApp message on the screen. And Jason Leach's sign-off there is, WhatsApp deletion is a pre-bed ritual. Ha ha ha.
Look at the smiling, the zipped-up mouth face there. I mean, these people were taking the you-know-what, weren't they? It's absolutely unbelievable.
Ken Thompson, he occupied one of these made-up roles in the Scottish executive, extremely well remunerated, and he was, don't ask me what he did, but it was just another kind of tacky job.
I suppose the fact that me and you can't name between us who the Scottish Health Minister or Health Secretary was at the time really proves the point.
It does.
They should have been the ones front and centre. Like, you know, Matt Hancock probably did as much, if not more, than Boris Johnson in these press conferences. And whatever you think of him, it was his responsibility because he was in charge of health at the time.
Yes.
Whereas you never saw anybody in Scotland apart from the dentist and Sturgeon who were just giving snide remarks to journalists.
And there was this other woman, a younger woman who had some kind of qualification that we were all supposed to about. What was her? I mean, what's she doing there? Like, who cares about this person? But she got all the attention as well. So it was the three of them. That's the three that I remember. And I was thinking, like, why are these strange people talking to me? I don't get it.
You'll notice she's nowhere to be seen. She's gone missing off the face of the earth ever since the pandemic because she came out so strongly in favour of Sturgeon, calling her the best politician in the world and all this stuff. And now she's, again, is another one who sought the limelight, maybe in Sturgeon's shadow, I suppose, but sought the limelight nonetheless. And now she's scared to appear in public. No doubt she'll be summoned to this inquiry at some point.
Yeah, that would be an interesting one. Yeah, absolutely. Well, Catherine says, on form tonight, Ash. Got a lot to be on form for.
This is it.
Did you? I don't know if you heard my. I was talking there about, to change the subject. Matt Goodwin is suggesting that Rishi Sunak should promise a referendum on immigration in order to outflank Labour, very much in the way that David Cameron outflanked UKIP prior to the 2015 general election, where he was going to lose a lot to UKIP. So what he did was he came up with a ruse that he would promise a referendum on Brexit, and he consequently took all of UKIP's votes at the general election in 2015, and they had the Brexit referendum in 2016, which didn't exactly go the way that Cameron had planned. But do you think that Rishi Sunak could be saved if he promised a referendum on a referendum that proposed to restrict immigration to a certain lower level? Or do you think Rishi Sunak's perhaps too far gone now?
I think it's twofold. Firstly, I think Rishi Sunak is disliked not necessarily because of himself, but because of the way that he took power and planned it months and months before Boris even resigned. He planned to take over Boris's job anyway, regardless of what was going on at the time. He didn't get the job that he wanted because Liz Truss beat him. The membership didn't want him. And then he took it by force anyway. So that's something that people don't like. The democratic will of this country, which was to vote Boris Johnson in, was taken away from the people, making the general election almost, null and void, if you will. But then Matt Goodwin is sort of right. Maybe offering a referendum could claw back a few points. But if you look at Cameron's promise in 2010, excuse me, I got a bit of a cold. Cameron's promise in 2010 was to reduce net migration figures down to the tens of thousands. It's now shot up to what? Best part of 700,000 every single year. So people have effectively been voting for a Tory government since 2010 that's going to reduce immigration. But all we're seeing is these numbers going through the roof. And if you look at PMQs and stuff, the one subject that neither Starmer nor Sunak will talk about is immigration. And that maybe if he offer, can you really offer a referendum on something that you've been promising for the last 13 years, 14 years anyway, and haven't done anything about?
Do you know, that's actually a very good point. A very good point indeed. It's like, why don't they just say, look, we're going to do this, and then do it? We've now got to the stage where we just don't believe, unfortunately, that the parties will do what they say. And we've got years of evidence on that, particularly on this matter. So it would to me, it would seem like a very insincere gesture. But if they did it, they would have to follow through with it. And then if they lost the referendum, which is to say the people actually said, yeah, we would like much, much lower immigration, then would that be sufficient for them to say, okay, now we're actually going to have to do something about it?
Personally, I think not, no. I don't think it would.
No.
I mean, he's got to do something drastic, definitely, because he's got Reform now as well behind him on, 13%. You're talking single figures now behind the Tories, and they seem to be gaining week on week. And I said this had happened because they brought Ben Habib in, who is a brilliant political operator, and he speaks much better than Richard Tice or Dr. David Bull or any of them. He's a very, very clever man, and he knows exactly what he's talking about. And like you, I actually watch Matt Goodwin quite a bit. He speaks very well as well.
Yes,
in fact, Rishi Sunak could do a lot worse than bringing Matt Goodwin in to try and save him. But I think if you wanted to offer a referendum to try and turn the fortunes around, I'd be offering it on net zero and say, do you want the 2050? The question is, should Britain have the 2050 or whatever it is, 2035? Is it 2050 still? I don't know. Net zero targets, and then or should we ditch them and carry on as we are now? And that is a referendum, I think, that would get people's interest, and that is something that people would go for.
Yeah, that's another good point. Yeah.
I know it's changing the subject a bit, but I think you get a lot of people on board with that, and I can tell you which way it'd go now. The establishment, once again, would tell us to vote for net zero, but the public, and it'd be a bigger margin than 52-48 as well. You'd be talking 65-35, something like that, easily. in favour of ditching net zero.
Yeah, exactly. Especially when it was made clear that ditching net zero is going to make your family and home bills considerably cheaper than what they are, and that it's only going to keep rising under the present system.
Well, even the government, the Office of Budget Responsibility, Office for National Statistics, none of them can put a figure on how much is going to cost this country or each individual taxpayer to do this net zero rubbish. Not one of them can tell us, and that's because the figures are so astronomical that even they can't imagine it. So what's it going to cost you and me? We've already seen our bills go through the roof once.
Yes.
That's my opinion.
Your opinion's worth hearing, that's for sure, as everybody seems to agree. TC says, always love listening to Ash. Eric comes in here with a point about the immigration. The problem is the courts. Even if the people voted in favour in a referendum, it still won't go through because it will be taken to court. Then the Supreme Court will rule in favour of the so-called human rights lawyers. Really, the solution is reforming the Human Rights Act when it comes to things like asylum seekers.
I wonder if you could do it and make it a legally binding referendum. Like they always said that the Brexit referendum was just advisory, didn't
Advisory,
yeah. So if you could make it legally binding, then I wonder if that would bypass the courts or prevent any appeals. I'm not really sure, but possibly.
Yeah, there's never been such a thing, as far as I'm aware, in British history as a legally binding referendum. And they are all just advisory. At least that's the convention. It's never been written into law that the government has to do a particular thing as a consequence of a referendum, and which in some ways is maybe just as well, because sometimes circumstances, the theory is that circumstances can change, so you can't bind a government to do something in case the circumstance at that time that it has to do it is in fact different from when it promised it. Yeah. And that's why politicians should never make promises, actually. If you're a good politician, the best you can say is, I'm going to aim to do that. But if you make a promise...
keep your powder dry.
Yeah, if you make a promise and then a year later circumstances are completely different, economically or politically or whatever, that you can't do it, then you're going to get, as you use the phrase, hoist on your own petard at a later time. So it's best to always be honest, of course, but not necessarily to promise things that you can't necessarily deliver, that you don't know that you're necessarily going to be delivering it for sure.
I see the point. I get it, but a lot of people disagree with me. I think there's a lot to be said for the Swiss style of government, which is a much more direct. It's called direct government, isn't it? So if they're going to make a big decision which is going to affect the public's future, they are obliged to give the public a say in a referendum on that. I mean, they have referendums all the time in Switzerland. I'm not saying you need them a referendum a month or anything like that. But if it's something big that we should have a say on, maybe, such as record amounts of immigration into the country or net zero that's going to make us all bankrupt, then I think we should be given a say on those policies. And in Switzerland, you would be given a say on those policies.
Oh yeah, I think there's a place for it in certain instances, definitely. Good. Ash, Derek says, Ash is the new Prime Minister and Alistair Deputy Prime Minister.
I won't get out of bed for that money.
I think you'll be making more money on your YouTube videos, actually, these days.
More people listen anyway than what listen to the Prime Minister, I think.
Yes, that's for sure. Catherine says, I'm with you there, Ash, on the whole. Well, listen, Ash, it's the top of the hour. Thank you very much for coming in.
Pleasure.
And for your wise words of wisdom, as always. And we do appreciate you coming on. I know that a lot of our viewers do as well. If they want to see your videos, and you do several short ones a day, they're at youtube.com/that Preston Journalist. And you're also on Twitter, which is now called X. And you are at x.com/AKWriting88. And just go onto YouTube and search That Preston Journalist, and they'll get you anyway.
Yep.
Okay, Ash, thanks very much for your contribution tonight, and we'll look forward, hopefully, to having you on throughout the year.
Yep, definitely. Thanks very much. I'll speak to you all soon. See you later. Cheers, Alistair.
Good night.
Bye-bye.